Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to the TFT Perspective. Viewers, news and breaking news coming from the Korean Peninsula. Seoul was in lockdown for at least 5 hours with the declaration of martial law announced by Mr. President Yoon. And these events that shaped up quickly changed, and we have now received the news that Mr. Yoon is being impeached by opposition parties, the six opposition parties who are currently holding the majority in parliament. I'm just going to go through a news piece about the timing of the incident, as well how quickly the whole situation reversed, and now it seems that President Yoon is going to be in a lot of trouble. So around at 11 p.m. This is the time that, in a televised address, Mr. Yoon declared martial law and emergency proceedings held all across the Korean capital as well as in different suburban areas of Seoul. Later that day, the parliamentarians were not allowed to go into the parliament to discuss the matters, and the president himself locked himself in the office, and nobody, even his secretary or the office staff, was not receiving any calls from the outside world, especially from South Korea. Other than that, the military was deployed to secure the parliament building. Speech was banned, press was being controlled, and a lot of opposition members came to the parliament. And there are a few very unique clips that coming out of this event. For example, the leader of the Democratic Party inside Korea was just walking over the barricades. He entered inside the South Korean parliament, and unanimously, like around 190 members of the parliament out of the 300 voted against the declaration of this martial law. Now, the unique structure of the Constitution of Korea is that the presidential has that powers to declare martial law emergency proceedings. In this case, only during wartime or severe emergency matters or situation is that the Korean state is at stake or a foreign threat is about. This is the probably one of the few reasons that were provided in the declaration by the president himself, that somehow the Democratic Party and its allies were in cahoots with Kim Jong Un as well as the North Korean leadership, and somehow they're going to invite Mr. Kim Jong Un to have dinner here, and he felt threatened. That's exactly the statement coming from the president office during the declaration time. So a few background into this is also that he did this to stop the current impeachment proceedings against his cabinet, basically, not the president directly. So, in short, it almost took around 5 hours to reverse the entire decision. The Supreme Court inside South Korea is going to consult with its judges and decide over how this declaration came to be, whether it was justified or not. The interesting part is that this happened at a very crucial time as well. South Korea has a very brutal history when it comes to its democracy. I'm just going to read a manuscript from Twitter that they had around 13 presidents, the current one as well, that almost all of them have been either overthrown, impeached, or imprisoned. And it has been a rough history for South Korea, especially for its democracy, especially for its president. In fact, a lot of commentators are saying that there is a Korean joke about this, that there are only two types of presidents in Korea: those who are in jail and those who are headed to jail. So we're going to start from 1948. Mr. Syngman Rhee was overthrown. Yoon Mun Seon afterwards overthrown. Park Chung Hee assassinated. In fact, he was assassinated by the KCIA, which is the Korean Central Intelligence Agency. Then Chui Koo Na removed by a military coup. This is when the famous uprising against the military took place. A lot of people lost their lives at that time, and many politicians in South Korea decided that at least they decided that democracy should prevail inside South Korea, and they should prevent any type of martial law administration afterwards. Chun Do-hwan sentenced to death after his presidency. Ru Tai-woo sentenced to 22 years in prison after his presidency. Kim Jong-sam imprisoned during the term of president and secured convictions against two of his predecessors. It was very famous. Kim Dae-jung imprisoned under president and sentenced to death under president number 5. Later pardoned, and he is also a Nobel Peace Prize laureate. This is very interesting. Ru Mu-hwan, impeached, which was later overturned by the Constitutional Court, was investigated for corruption after his term and committed suicide later onwards. Lee Myung-bak, at 2008 till 2020, arrested for corruption after his presidency, and he's been sentenced for 15 years in prison. Park Geun-hye, 2013-2016, impeached and arrested for corruption, sentenced to 24 years in prison. Very brutal. The only president who seemed to have escaped out of all this is the one who shook hands with the North Korean leaders, Moon Jae-in, recent president, no imprisonment. And then Yoon Suk Yeol, who is currently facing impeachment as far as we know. So this is the general idea and scope of the so-called democracy inside South Korea, especially coming from the leaders at least, that presidents after presidents tend to give death sentences as well as assassinations against their predecessors, jailing sentences, and all that riffraff. We have with us Mr. Wakar K. Korvi. We're going to discuss this current fiasco. So it seems that he altered his impending impeachment for 5 years at least. Another joke added to the South Korean history.
Yeah, I think before we start, it's important to look into what's in the mind of the supreme leader of North Korea, Mr. Kim Jong.
I saw that famous picture of him looking across his binoculars on the border.
Yeah, so he's been shown, gazing across 38 parallel and into South Korea. And if you look at the narrative built up by the current president, to something to do with North Korea. It is also said that there are some cells working in South Korea for unification of both Korea. And somehow the mighty US doesn't like it. If you look at the response coming from international community and international media, initially I think there was a kind of, watch and wait policy. But later on, as I think South Korean parliament then exerted pressure. And we have seen, as you mentioned, there are people who are using
statements like carefully observing the situation taking place coming from the US and its allies. It seems very troubling, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think Antony Blinken in the morning also tweeted that no, they are with the democratic dispensation. And I think maximum responses come from US. It's very interesting because there are senators, there are congressmen, people from the House's Foreign Relations Committee, and definitely there is a transition. So I think the timing selected by President was critical. There are also, I think, unconfirmed reports because you have 30,000 US troops on the peninsula, especially in the South Korea. Definitely there's a talk going on for placing of nuclear weapons, air defense systems, and somehow North Korea has also shown a lot of saber rattling by firing, shot across the bow. They've been missile firing passing over either Sea of Japan or South Korea. There's a lot of tension. And then now link it with what was happening in Syria, what was happening in Ukraine, Palestine, Israel conflict. So it appears to be, a lot of instability happening. These are known as basically, I would say, nuclear flashpoints. Korean Peninsula has seen a long war, unfortunately divided along the 38th parallel. We're not going into details. But the way you have, I think, described what has been the democratic dispensation in South Korea is very interesting. And somehow in Pakistan, there are friends, definitely. South Korea is a very good friend. And a lot of Pakistanis do work there. And there's a lot of respect
but the unfortunate thing is it's projected as a very, Western style of government with its liberty and symbolism. But it seems to be very much, I would say, equal in terms to how things shape up in Pakistan.
Yeah, I think there are similarities. But I would say that now the democracies also have to look into it, that whether in this time of social media and post-truth, where the news would spread, and there could be fake news, there could be it could actually, create a lot of chaos in a very apparently very stable country. But the way I think you've described their history, it means that it has already been affected by, I would say, political wrangling. And generally no news comes about these areas, especially if you look at West, like South Korea and Japan are also considered part of the West as far as their, I would say, development. And they were part of, South Korea was part of NIC, or newly industrialized countries, and now it is fully developed country. They're part of, I think, G20, very strong economy. But there has been, I think, pressure on the economy in Japan and South Korea. So all told, I think this is one... we actually hope that things stabilize, because the way things are going, I'm sure if the opposition succeeds in impeachment, they bring their own president. So there'll be another series of, reprisals.
Yeah.
What would happen to the military? At least the two battalions which were trying to enter the parliament.
Yeah, that's a fascinating aspect as well, because the military suggested that the defense minister was having a close eye with the president, and he informed him that you should go with this since there are a lot of traitors amongst us. Very sus of so many people inside South Korea. And the scenes that were observed during the military lockdown as well, it seemed that the people didn't care what was happening. They came on the streets, defended their democratic principles, and a lot of people are suggesting that this guy has gone crazy, including the parliamentary head of the current ruling government suggested that this is wrong, and seems like Mr. Yoon has lost his head.
Yeah, I think at times political calculation can backfire very rapidly.
But do you think there's only is to save his political side, since he had very less, I would say, approval ratings in the recent survey, 25%, if I'm not mistaken, and ongoing health crisis issue. A lot of doctors are striking inside South Korea as well. Then the economic issue of the new budget being passed, with the parliament strongly being controlled by the opposition. Do you think this was only politically motivated, or there is some truth to Mr. Yoon's approach to it, that a lot of opposition members are conspiring against South Korea and trying to be cozy with Mr. Rocket Man?
Yeah, I think this is $1 million question, because to find, because just I would say this last 24 or 12 to 24 hours, and still we are not very clear what is coming on the social media is true. But I would relate it to what happened in Ukraine. You remember there was a sitting president, and definitely in that case it was a reversal, because he was pro-Russian, and then there was a Maidan, and even I think there is a famous square in Seoul,
Yes.
Gwangwon Square, something like that. So it's becoming something like the
Tahrir Square.
Tahrir Square or Taksim Square of Turkey, and people are gathering. So I think now it's almost evening time. So it means that people have responded. But it is something more than what meets the eye. Why should the president go crazy and then without some nod coming from some quarter? And when you say defense minister, it means that part of the military. And if it is part of the military, then definitely they have. And if you look at the president, I think he had very good relations with the United States.
Yes, definitely.
And in case the opposition were trying to, basically South Korea has a serious dilemma. If they don't reconcile with North Korea, there is a threat of nuclear war. And they have already, I think, refused placing of nuclear weapons on South Korean soil. I think so, if I am not wrong. So it means that there is a push from the United States, maybe. I'm not saying that it's definite, to maybe crush any semblance of developing good relations with North Korea. Because if you look at North Korea now is in a full-fledged military alliance with Russia. There are troops, I think more than 10,000 already in Kursk salient, fighting against Ukraine. So it's a huge, I think, shift which is taking place. And within that, in case there is a feeling within South Korea that there are political parties and almost 50% of the people don't want war. They would like, because what is the stake for US is now those 30,000 troops, then its presence in Indo-Pacific, because it shakes the entire foundation of Quad and Indo-Pacific and entire military strategy. And in case there is a rapprochement between North and South Korea. So in case the opposition was trying to do, let's suppose that it was going against the American interest, I'm sure there was something. And somehow, unfortunately,
because it
Uncle Sam thrives on chaos.
It didn't resonate during his campaign as well. He never mentioned this, that the opposition parties were conspiring against the state or something like that. This only came in his declaration for the martial law, this statement. It came out of nowhere.
Because, when you impose martial law in a democracy, in a very mature democracy, which is, despite that we've seen what happened to the president, so I think we have to have a rethink at whether you can call it a democracy or it's a quasi kind of, a political setup where basically there's so much of political wrangling that no president has survived. I think this is unique. I don't think so any country comes in parallel to South Korea in terms of sacking or imprisoning the president or maybe assassinate. It's very, very unfortunate. But that's how maybe democracy has survived there. So it means that there was something very, very urgent. Now put the defense minister behind it, So it means because definitely he controls the military, as far as the executive chain of command is concerned, and then there are some battalions. So it means something like like Pakistan has some let's say troops in Pindi who would immediately react to any emergency. So I'm sure Seoul garrison had these troops which were moved. So if two battalions were moved, me the army was involved, and if the army was involved, not because there are unconfirmed reports that maybe there are 30,000 American troops in South Korea. So maybe there was some linkage. There was a push to crush this sentiment. So basically, we were highlighting that the linkage with Uncle Sam, because Uncle Sam cannot afford a rapprochement between, apparently, despite that there are now statements coming in support of, let's say, the opposition, that U.S. doesn't endorse, any martial law. But definitely, they would not like South Korea to slide, as per them, into a, let's say, a kind of friendship with North Korea, rapprochement, and then there's no need of those 30,000 U.S. troops. So then it starts affecting the entire U.S. strategy in the Indo-Pacific.
Yeah, another important question comes to mind is, what if the president is right? And there is something going on between the North Koreans and the current opposition groups inside South Korea, and they do move for reunification. Do you think that the supreme leader is going to enter his forces across the 39th parallel?
I think we look at preparation on the North Korean side, and now their military alliance. There's a formal military alliance with President
Russia,
Russia,
yes.
and I think he's one of the few allies that Russia has. And they would, I think, definitely like Mr. Putin would like President Putin would like to now, finally go for this skill. There could be genuine sentiment in South Korea for reunification, and imagine let's they ask for help from North Korean military,
Mm.
and they start moving in. So instead of the specter of war and nuclear holocaust, this could be just a free run, and then and then who's thrown out of South Korea, and then what happens to Japan, what happens to Indo-Pacific, and what happens to U.S. forces? Because if you look at the way those fronts are being opened in Syria and Ukraine, they have tried very hard the military option. There have been efforts even to destabilize Afghanistan further for the region. So others can also play. And I think President Putin also mentioned some time back that we'll now respond in other theaters.
Mm.
So this could be an opportunity. We not like the war, but this could be a very, very soft coup from the other side. And here goes entire, let's say Western or US design in the Indo-Pacific. Because I think South Korea is a pivotal country in the scheme of things since end of Second World War and then end of Korean War. Because this was fought very violently on both sides, and then there was a division. And maybe the Korean people generally feel that they would not opt for a nuclear war. Why they should have their capitals and cities burned down to ashes instead of, and ultimately they are Koreans.
Yeah.
They are not enemies. Like East and West Germany, ultimately when they united, you go there, travel there.
There must be just ideological differences. Other than that, they are the same
There are
people.
families. There are people who are married across 38 parallel. They are not two countries. It's one nation.
Yeah, last question. The future of democracies, especially in this case.
Yeah, I think we also related to future of democracy in the post-truth era, and there's a lot of debate going on. The way, let's say, President Trump conducted himself in the past, and the way he's going to conduct it, he's going, all guns blazing against the establishment. In Europe, we are seeing right wing rising. And then there's a lot of chaos in the new democracies. India, although they claim to be the most stable, region, but we've seen what happened in Bangladesh because of public uprising. Indian Northeast is burning. There are questions being asked on what is
I
happening.
mean, the definition of rule of law is being changed thoroughly, whether it be on the liberal side or the conservative side. We just know that President Biden has pardoned his own son, who kept on repeating that I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, so that's the rule of law. So it means that even basic fundamentals of democracy are being challenged. Because if you look at Alexander Dugin's theory, fourth political theory, I think this is what he talks about. That this has now become a swamp, and he says that there is a need to. So it means there are alternate systems which are coming. Look at the, let's say, I would just highlight the areas or region or country which are stable. Russia internally, because there is definitely there is an election, there is a president, but then you can't do much about Russia sitting inside Russia and against China. look at the economic progress. Then you go to Middle East,
Mhm.
I think, which is a very good model. Despite that,
All of the majority of them are monarchies, but still it's a very
monarchies,
unique
but
model.
they have delivered it for the people. Then you have, let's say, Iran. You
Mhm.
can't say this is, let's say, uh, 100% democracy. There's only one party which can rule, and then there is definitely a supreme
Although we
leader.
don't receive much news about North Korea, but it seems stable as well.
Yeah, so it also seems stable. Then even if you go to South America, you go to certain African states. So I think the ultimately those pundits who basically presented, like, I just laugh at Francis Fukuyama's end of history and the last man, because he said this is the ultimate system that I'm sure if Francis Fukuyama is alive, he can comment on that. And these used to be, bright icons of democracy. South Korea used to
Mhm.
be quoted, Europe, North America, India, and he used to say that this system is the ultimate system man has found, and this is the what I mean going to probably last till doomsday, and rest of the world would now converge to become more democratic. But I think it's going other way around, including Pakistan. It's
Yeah.
a good lesson that mainly what people want. Look at
Mhm.
Middle East or China, is that economically they should be, you know, they should be well settled, and there is a growth. Basically, you should have ability to, let's say, use your talent.
Mhm.
You should have security in the state, and then look after your family, and then contribute to, let's say, your country. So I'm sure there should be some thought on why, this kind of democratic model is now really becoming a swamp.
So let's see how things unfold in Korea, ladies and gentlemen. That's it for today, folks. Thank you so much for watching us. Please do leave a like and subscribe. Bye bye.